Hello and welcome to my channel. I am so excited about this video. It has been in the making for a long time now. So today we are going to be making a crochet tapestry matching set. So a sweater and pants that match, and I can't even show you the entire thing here because I can't get my whole body in the camera. So I'll put a clip right here of what it looks like from head to toe. It is so cute. A little disclaimer. So this design took me so long to put together that by the time I was done making this sweater, the store I buy my yarn from stopped selling this shade of white, so I had to buy a completely different shade of white for the pants. So if you're thinking it looks like they don't quite match, you are totally right. They do not quite match because it took me that long to put this together that they don't even sell that yarn anymore. But regardless, this is such a cute matching set and I am so excited to show you how to make your own. Before we get started, I'm just going to remind you to please like this video and subscribe because it helps me out so much. Your support means the world to me as always. And now here is the tutorial, starting off with how to make the sweater here. For this tutorial, I will be using weight 4 acrylic yarn and a 5mm crochet hook. For the body of the sweater, I'm going to be using this white yarn, and then for all of the accents and designs that we're adding, I'll be using this dark blue yarn. We're going to start with our base color, which is going to be this white yarn. So now I'm going to go ahead and cast on with our starting color. To find the perfect measurements for your sweater, you're going to take the yarn that you're using and make a little swatch. So you're going to chain 10 and then do about 3 or 4 rows of single crochet onto that chain of 10. And once you have done that, you want to measure it and see how wide that piece is. So I did that for my own project and I found that it came out to be about 2.5 inches. So then you're going to find an already existing sweater in your closet that you like the fit of and that you want to kind of replicate that same fit with the sweater we're making today. So you're going to take that sweater or shirt and you're going to then measure the front panel. So you're going to go from one seam, so one side, to the other and see how many inches across that is. The shirt that I was working with was about 23 inches across. So then with that knowledge, I can then do the math to determine how many chains I would need in order to get 23 inches. So if I know that the 10 chains is 2.5 inches, I then did the math, rounding up a little bit so I had a little bit of extra room, and deduced that I needed to do 95 chains in order to reach 23 inches. So now that you have deduced the number of chains you're going to do, go ahead and make that chain for yourself now. I will be doing 95 as I mentioned before. Okay, so here I now have my chain of 95 for that front panel. So we're already going to go ahead and place our design into this very first row of crochet, and we're going to be switching colors with a method called tapestry crochet. I'm going to do my very best to explain it to you right now, but if it's confusing, there are so many other tutorials on YouTube of people who are going to walk you through it a lot slower. So feel free to go look at a different tutorial if you need to learn how to tapestry crochet, but I'm going to do my very best to teach it to you here in this tutorial as well. So into our very first stitch, I'm just going to insert my hook and I'm going to pick up my yarn like I would for a single crochet. And now typically in single crochet, you would then pick up this yarn and pull that through to make the single crochet, like so. But instead of picking up that yarn and pulling it through, I'm just going to leave these 2 loops here on my hook. I'm then going to drop my white yarn and I'm going to let it fall behind my project, like so. I'm then going to bring in my next color, which is this dark blue yarn. I'm going to pick this up with my hook and I'm just going to pull it through these 2 loops. So now we have the 2 loops of white yarn and the 1 loop of blue yarn here on our hook. I am then going to insert my hook right into the next stitch, and I'm making sure that the white yarn from before is on top of my hook. So where we have this white tail of yarn that we dropped to the back from before, I'm making sure that tail of yarn is on top of my hook like this. So then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick up this blue yarn like so. So again, we have those 2 loops of blue yarn, and now I want to switch colors again. So I'm going to go back to the white yarn and I'm going to drop that blue yarn, pick up the white yarn, and then pull that through these 2 loops. And then into the next stitch, again, I'm going to insert my hook right into that next chain stitch. I'm making sure this blue yarn is on top of the hook. I'm going to pick up my white yarn, so I have the 2 loops here on my hook, and then I'm going to switch to the blue yarn and pull that blue yarn through both loops, therefore switching colors back to blue. So here we have our first little color switches. We've got white, blue, and white, and now I'm all set to go ahead and do blue. And you're going to work your way all the way down this row, just switching colors at every single stitch. So then I'm going to go ahead and repeat the same process all the way down to the end of the row, and I'll see you once I'm done with that. So now at the end of this row, I'm making sure that I'm ending with blue yarn here. So then I can go ahead and chain one with that blue yarn and then turn my work. So we're working onto the other side, which the second row is going to be entirely with this blue yarn. We're not going to switch colors at all. However, I am going to make sure that I carry the white yarn with me. So once I'm at the end of this row, I want to have both the white and the blue yarn at that end. So the way that you're going to carry yarn is when you have your hook inserted into the stitch you're placing a single crochet into, you're going to then make sure that this yarn here, the white yarn that I'm not using, I'm still making sure that it is above the hook here. That way when I then place my single crochet, it sandwiches that white yarn into the stitch, and then that's going to carry the yarn along with me to the other side of the row. Again, I'm inserting my hook into this next stitch, and I have the white yarn above my hook, so then when I place my single crochet with the blue yarn, that white yarn is sort of sandwiched there in between the stitch. You can't see it on either side of the row. All you see is the blue yarn. Now I'm just going to go ahead and do one row of just plain single crochet with the dark blue yarn while carrying that white yarn along with me, and I'll see you once I'm done with the row. Okay, so now in this last stitch of the row, I've dropped the white yarn, so I'm no longer carrying it along with me, and I'm going to just finish off that very last stitch of blue. So now we have one full row here of this dark blue, and I'm going to chain one and turn my work. So now we're on to row number 3 of the sweater. And so now for row 3, we're going to do the same thing that we did for row 1, where I'm switching colors every other stitch, only I'm going to do it opposite of what we did in row 1. So in row 1, we started with white and then went to blue. For this row, I'm going to start with blue and then go to white. So I've got my blue stitch here with the 2 loops of yarn, and then just like before, I'm picking up that white yarn and pulling it through the 2 loops, therefore switching my color to white. And then I'm going to go ahead and do my next stitch in white, and then before I pull that yarn through, I'm switching to blue, pulling the blue through and switching to that color. Just like so, and now I'm going to work my way all the way down the row, switching colors every single stitch as we did in row number 1, and I'll see you at the end of this row. So now this last stitch here I am doing in blue, but we need to start our next row in white, so I'm going to still switch my colors over to white, like so. And now for this next row, I'm all set to chain one with my white yarn and turn my work. And now for this side, we're going to do the exact same thing we did with the dark blue yarn, where I'm going to be placing one single crochet into every single stitch all the way along this row. And just like before, where we carried the white yarn along with us as we did that row, I'm going to be carrying this blue yarn with me, so it's at the other end of the row once we're done. So just as we did with that previous row, every time I insert my hook into a stitch, I'm making sure that blue yarn is resting on top of my hook here. So I'm going to go ahead and just do this one row of single crochet all the way across, and I'll see you once I'm done with that. Okay, so now before I do this very last stitch of the row, I'm just dropping the blue yarn and I'm going to place my final single crochet. I'm then going to chain one and turn my work. And now to start this row, I'm going to do one single crochet, but I'm going to switch to my blue in that one stitch. So before I pull the white yarn through, I'm going to switch to blue and pull that blue yarn through instead. And then we're going to do one stitch of blue. And now instead of switching back to the white and the blue every single stitch, we're actually going to do 3 white stitches in between each blue. So there is my blue stitch, and now I'm going to do 1, 2 white stitches, and as I do these stitches, I'm carrying that blue yarn like I've showed you before. So I have the blue yarn above my hook, I'm carrying it with me. So there's 2 white stitches, and then in that third stitch, which is the one right before we switch to the blue, I'm pulling up the 2 loops, and then I'm going to switch to the blue here, so I'm pulling the blue through that white stitch, like so. And then we're going to do the 1 white stitch, which again I've got the 2 loops, and then I pull the white yarn through, and now we get to do our 3 white stitches again, which I am carrying the blue yarn with me through those 3 white stitches. So as you can see here, we've got the blue stitch, the 3 white, and then the 1 blue again. So now I'm doing these 2 white stitches, and the third one, I'm going to pull through the 2 loops, switch back to blue, so then I can have that 1 blue stitch like so, which we then switch back to white. So just like that, every 3 white stitches you do 1 blue stitch. or whatever color you're using. So now I'm going to go ahead and complete this row with the exact same pattern that I just showed you of 3 white, 1 blue all the way down to the end of the row, and I'll see you at the end. So now at the end of the row, I'm just going to chain 1 and then turn my work. And now, contrary to the row that we just did, we're going to be doing 3 blue for every 1 white. And we're also going to be lining up these blue stitches to sit right over the previous blue. We're going to make almost a capital T. So I'm going to start here with these 2 white stitches because now I'm lined up to do 3 blue right over this blue here. So again, I'm just going to switch and bring my blue. I don't think we've encountered this yet, so let me explain this to you quickly. When you're doing tapestry crochet, there is a distinct front and back to your design. On this design, as you can see, this is the front of our work. It's much cleaner. You can see all of the little stitches we're trying to make without much overlap. And then if you flip it over to this side, you can see it's quite messy. You can see where the yarn sort of looped around in the back. So this is very clearly, this messy side is the back of our work. This is the front of our work. So far with the way the rows have lined up, this has yet to be a problem, but now we're going to talk about how, because we're working into the back of the work, when I go to switch my yarn colors, in the past I would just put the yarn to the back, pick up my new color and bring that through. But because this is now the back of the work, we want to bring our yarn to the front. So when I drop the white yarn, I'm dropping it in the front of my project instead of the back of my project, because you want to always drop your yarn on the messy side or the wrong side of the project. So now I can bring my blue yarn and pull that through, and then do my 3 stitches of blue, carrying the white yarn with me, like so. And now on this 3rd blue stitch, I'm going to drop my blue yarn, so I'm bringing it to the front, to the messy side of the project, and then I'm going to pick up the white and pull that through, to then do our 1 stitch of white. And after our 1 stitch of white, I'm dropping that yarn to the front of the project, picking up the blue, and now we can do our 3 stitches of blue, which perfectly lines up with that previous stitch of blue, where we're making sort of a capital T. And I'm just going to follow that exact same pattern all the way down to the end of this row, and I'll see you once I'm done with the row. Okay, and then for my last stitch here of the row, I'm ending on blue because I have my 3 blue here. But I do want to make sure I'm switching to white because I need my row on the next side to start with white. So right here in this last stitch, I'm switching to white. I'm going to go ahead and chain 1 and then turn my work. And so now for this next row, we're going to be doing the exact same thing that we did in the previous row. So this row here, we're going to repeat the exact same method. We're basically making diamonds, as you can see in the graph, or like little X's, where we have 1 stitch of blue, 3 stitches of blue, and then we're going to do 1 stitch again at the top to make this diamond shape. So this very first stitch I'm going to do white, but I'm going to switch to blue, and then again, because we're now working on the clean side and the messy side is at the back, I'm making sure when I drop my yarn, I'm dropping it to the back again. So now we've switched to blue, and I'm going to do my 1 stitch of blue, and then we're going to do 3 stitches of white. Now in this 3rd stitch of white, I'm switching back to the blue. That way into this middle stitch here, we can place a blue. So I'm going to go ahead and work this same pattern all the way down to the end of the row, and I'll see you once I'm done with that. So now in the last stitch of the row, which is still going to be white, I'm going to drop my blue yarn so we don't have to carry it through that last stitch and cause a weird lump. And I'm going to go ahead and do my last stitch, and then chain 1 and turn my work. And now on this side, we're going to be doing just 1 row of plain white crochet, and as always, I'm carrying that blue yarn with me. So in every single one of these stitches, I'm making sure the blue yarn is above my hook. That way it's getting sandwiched in between the stitch and it's getting carried along to the end of the row. And now in my last stitch of the row, I'm going to be switching to my blue yarn. So I've got my 2 loops of white, and I'm going to pull that blue through. That way I can then chain 1 with the blue and turn my work. And the reason why I switched to blue is because if we look down here at the start of our pattern, and I'm looking at this top row of the blue, white, and whichever one I started on for that top row, which is the blue in my case, is the one I want to start on here. So if by chance you have your top row being white, then you don't want to switch to the blue and you want to keep it white, or whatever color you're using. And I'm going to do my first stitch now in blue, but I'm going to switch to white, so I've got the 2 loops, and now I'm pulling that white through. so then my next stitch can be in white. So just like we did at the beginning of this design, I am switching colors for every single stitch. Okay, so now I'm making sure that I am indeed ending on blue, and if you have a different count than me, so you ended up ending with your white yarn or whatever color you're using, then at this time you would go ahead and switch to the blue yarn. That way when you chain one and then turn your work like I am doing, you're all set to go and start working with the blue yarn. And now for this row, we're just going to do the entire thing with solid blue yarn. So I'm just doing single crochets of blue into every single stitch. And like always, I am carrying that white yarn with me over to the other side of the row. So now at the end of the row, I'm going to chain one and turn my work. And now just like we did in the previous part of this design down here, you're going to go ahead and switch colors with every single stitch opposite to the color switches you have in the previous row. So in this row we switch colors every single stitch, and now this time I'm doing the same thing but opposite. So where it's white below here, I'm doing blue. Where it's blue below here, I'm doing white. And I'm going to go ahead and do this all the way down for the rest of this row, and I'll see you at the end of the row. Okay, so I'm now ending on the white yarn here, and I'm going to go ahead and chain one so I can turn my work. And this concludes our first design of the sweater. We're not going to need the blue yarn for quite a while still, so I'm going to go ahead and actually cast off. So I'm cutting this yarn, leaving quite a long tail so that I can weave it in later. So I have now casted off the blue yarn. I'm only working with the white yarn now, and I'm going to just do a bunch of rows of single crochet with this white yarn. And just for reference, at this point in the project, your design should be looking like this. So now you're going to go ahead and complete several rows with just your plain sweater color, as I did here with the white yarn. So from here to here, I ended up doing 36 rows of single crochet, and I'm now ready to start our next design. The way you can determine how long you need this to be, you're going to hold this panel up to the front of your body where the bottom here is in line with your waist, and keep in mind that we will be adding another inch or so to the bottom. So wherever you want the sweater to lay, remember that there will be some extra fabric as well. And then the top portion of the panel here should land slightly below your chest, because we want the next design to go across your chest, and the next design is going to take up about 5.5 inches of space. So when I hold this panel up to the front of my body, I then take a ruler and measure 5.5 additional inches to see where that lands. And for me, it lands sort of at my collar, a little bit below my collar, which is perfect. You can go ahead and start up on our next portion of the design. So however many rows you ended up doing of that plain single crochet, just make sure whichever one you ended on the wrong side of the project, so that way once we start our design we can start it on the right side of the project. So now that that's all out of the way, let's get started on the design. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my project. So now we're facing the right side here, and we're all ready to start on our next row. So this is going to be our first row of this design. So the first 3 stitches I'm just going to do in plain white, or whatever your solid color is. You're going to do 3 stitches. And in that 3rd stitch, we're going to prepare to switch colors. And then I'm going to bring in my dark blue yarn, which I'm going to pull through both loops like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and complete our next stitch in dark blue, which before I can complete that stitch, I'm going to switch back over to white. So we're going to switch over to white and then do another 3 stitches of white. And then in that 3rd stitch, I'm going to switch back over to blue. And this is just as we were doing before in the previous design. You're just going to switch back and forth. Every 3 white stitches, you're going to switch and do 1 blue stitch. And then I'm going to do 3 white stitches, and when I do those 3 white stitches in between the blue, I'm making sure that I am carrying the yarn with me, so I have the blue yarn on top of my hook as well. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat this same pattern as I've been doing already, and I'll see you once I reach the end of the row. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue this exact same pattern of stitches all the way down to the end of the row, and I'll see you once I reach the end. Okay, so I'm going to be ending on a blue stitch then, which is perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 1 and then turn my work. And now as you can see on the graph here, we're making these little like plus signs. So in the first row, we did the very bottom of the sign, and now we're doing that middle row where we have mostly blue. So I have the little bottom piece here, and now I've got 1 blue lined up with that, and then the next blue on the outside. So this one is a half completed plus sign because it is on the edge. But now I'm going to go ahead and switch to my white yarn, and now we're only going to do one stitch in white yarn. So you're just going to do 3 blue, 1 white, 3 blue, 1 white, all the way down to the end of the row. And remember, because we are working on the wrong side, as you can see here, we have the wrong side facing up, that whenever you switch colors, you want to pull your yarn to the front, because you always want to leave your yarn on the wrong side. Okay, and I've done my 1 white stitch, and I'm going to end off here on a blue stitch. So I'm going to quickly switch over from the blue to the white, so that way I can start my next row with my base color. So I'm going to chain 1 with that white and turn my work. And now in this next row, we're going to complete these little diamond or plus sign shapes by doing 3 white, 1 blue, like we did in that earlier row. So here's 3 white, and then I'm switching to 1 blue, and I'm going to go ahead and do 1 blue stitch, and then switch over to white to do 3 white stitches. And you want to make sure that that 1 blue stitch is lined up with the 1 blue stitch 2 rows back now, so you have your little plus sign like so. So now I'm going to go ahead and repeat this same pattern of 3 white, 1 blue, all the way down to the end of the row, and I'll see you once I reach the end. And now at the end of the row here, I've done my 3 stitches of white, so now I have to quick switch over to blue. 1 stitch of blue here in this very last stitch, and then I'm going to switch back over to white, so that way we're ending on our solid color, so I can chain 1 and turn my work like so. And now we're all set to do 1 row of just solid white. So in every single one of these stitches, we're going to place 1 single crochet of plain white. And like always, you want to make sure that you're carrying that blue yarn with you over to the other side. So whenever I do a stitch, I'm making sure the blue yarn is resting on top of my hook. So that way when I do my single crochet, it sandwiches that yarn in between the stitch, and I can then carry it along with me to the other side of the row. So now at the end of the row, I'm going to chain 1 and then turn my work. And then I'm going to start with that 1 single crochet, but before I finish off that stitch, I'm going to then right away switch to blue. And then into that next stitch, we're going to do the exact same thing, where I'm going to start doing that single crochet, but then switch to white. And we're going to be making one of these rows where we just switch colors with every single stitch. So I'm ending here on the dark blue yarn, which is absolutely perfect. So now I'm going to go ahead and chain 1 and turn our work. And now I'm just going to do 1 solid row of the dark blue yarn. So I'm just placing 1 single crochet stitch of this blue yarn into every single stitch all the way across. And of course, I am making sure that I am carrying the white yarn with me over to the other side of our project. So now in my last stitch, I'm going to go ahead and chain 1 and then turn my work. And now we are going to be doing the same thing we did previously, where we're going to switch colors with every single stitch, only this time you want to make sure that you're doing the opposite colors. So if we look down to the row previous to this last one, you can see I did white, blue, white, blue, white, blue. So now in this row, I'm going to do blue, white, blue, white. That way it's opposite of what we did before. So I'm going to go ahead and place my first stitch here with the blue, and I'm ending the row here on the white yarn, which is absolutely perfect. So then you can chain 1 with that white or base color and turn your work. And now we're going to go ahead and do 1 row of just solid white single crochet all the way down while carrying that blue yarn with you. And when I'm doing this row, when I reach the portion here where I'm only 6 stitches away from the end, I'm going to go ahead and drop this blue yarn. And I'm just going to continue doing these last few stitches with just single crochet of the white yarn without carrying that blue with me. Like so. And now into this last stitch, single crochet. I'm then going to chain 1 and turn my work. So now our first 6 stitches of this row are just going to be plain white single crochet. And then before I complete that last stitch, I'm going to go ahead and switch colors over to the blue yarn, which because we dropped the blue yarn before, it's already sitting here perfectly lined up, ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that yarn through like so. And now we're going to do 2 stitches of blue yarn. And then the second stitch we're going to leave uncompleted and then go ahead and switch over to that white yarn, which we're then going to do 3 stitches of white. And then in that third stitch, we're going to switch back to blue. And then we're going to do 2 stitches with the blue. So there's 1. And then in the second stitch, we're going to switch back over to white. And now we're going to do 8 stitches of white, carrying that blue yarn along with us. So I'm keeping the blue yarn on top of my hook. And I'm going to go ahead and do 8 stitches. And now into our 8th stitch here, I'm not going to complete that stitch. Instead, I'm going to switch over to blue, like so, and then we're going to do 2 stitches of blue, and then in that second stitch we're going to switch back over to white, so we can then do 3 stitches of white. And then in that third stitch I'm going to leave it uncompleted, that way we can switch back to blue for 2 stitches of blue. And then I'm switching back to white, and now we're going to go ahead and do 8 stitches of white. And then you're going to follow that exact same pattern all the way down to the end of the row. So you're going to do 8 stitches, 2, 3, 2, 8. So now I'm going to go ahead and chain 1 and then turn my work. And then for this row, we're going to be placing 1 blue stitch on the borders of each of these blue stitches of the previous row. So 1 here and here right on the border. So I'm going to go ahead and place the white single crochet up to that stitch. So now in this stitch here, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to blue. And again, because I'm working with the wrong side in the front of my project, I'm bringing my yarn to the front when I drop it. So now I'm going to pick up the blue yarn, and we're going to do 1 stitch of blue right on the border of the blue of the previous row. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to white, and then we're going to do 2 stitches of white. And in that second stitch, I'm going to leave it uncompleted. That way I can then switch back to the blue, like so. And then we're going to do 1 stitch of blue, and then switch back to white, 1 stitch of white, and switch back to blue, and then 1 stitch of blue. And then we're going to do 2 stitches of white here on top of those blue stitches of the previous row. And then we're going to switch back to blue for 1 stitch of blue, and then back to white. So it should look like this, where you have your 2 blue stitches of the previous row, and then on the border of those 2 stitches in this next row here, we have 2 blue stitches as well. And so you're just going to go ahead and do this all the way down the rest of the row. I'm now going to place white single crochet all the way down until I reach this next section of blue, where I'm then going to place a blue stitch on the outside of each of these blue stitches of the previous row. And then again, the same thing for this one, and for these as well. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and chain 1 and then turn our work. So now your design should look something like this, and you can clearly tell where each of the flowers are now. So every single one of these is a different flower. For this row, we're going to go ahead and start off by doing white single crochet up until the stitch before the blue stitch of the previous row. And now in this stitch here, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my blue yarn, and we're going to do 2 stitches of blue. And then I'm going to switch over to white, and we're going to do 3 stitches of white. So you should end up on your last stitch of white being on this blue stitch of the previous row. So then we can switch over to blue, and now we can place a blue stitch right in between these 2 blue stitches of the previous row. So right in that 1 white stitch, we're going to place a single blue stitch and then switch back to white. And now we're going to do 3 stitches of white single crochet, which in this 3rd stitch here, I'm going to switch back to blue. And this should line up in a way that your first blue stitch here is going to be right on top of the last blue stitch of the previous row. Then I'm placing another blue stitch right on top, and we're going to do 1 more stitch of blue and then switch over to white. And now we are moving on to our second flower, so I'm going to place single crochets of white all the way up until I reach the stitch right before that first blue stitch of the next flower. So it should look like this, and now I'm going to go ahead and repeat that exact same pattern of stitches all the way across the rest of this row. And then for the flower pattern for the next row here, I'm going to go ahead and switch to blue when I am 1 stitch away from the blue of the previous stitch, that very first blue of the flower, and then into that stitch we're going to do 1 blue stitch. I'm then going to switch right back to white, and we're going to do 2 white stitches. So on top of the 2 blue stitches of the previous row, we're going to do white. And now I'm going to switch right back to blue, and then we're just going to do 1 stitch here in blue. I am then going to do 2 white stitches, and into that second stitch there, I'm going to switch back over to blue, which then should perfectly line you up with this blue stitch of the previous row that's like right in the middle of the 2 flower petals. So then right into that blue stitch, we're going to place another blue stitch, and then switch right back to white. I then did 2 white stitches, which should bring you to the stitch right before this little section of blue. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my blue yarn, and then we're going to do 1 stitch of blue, switch back to white, 2 stitches of white, so right on top of the blue stitches from the previous row, I am doing 2 stitches of white, switch back to blue, and then right here, I'm just going to do 1 stitch of blue. I'm then going to go ahead and switch back to my white yarn, and we're going to single crochet over to the next flower. At this point, your design should look like this, and now I'm going to go ahead and repeat that same stitch pattern all the way down to the end of the row. Okay, and then for the next row of the flower design, you're going to go ahead and crochet with that base color, which for me is the white, up until I reach the very first color of blue here. So now I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the blue yarn. So now into this very first stitch of blue, I can place another stitch of blue like so. I'm then going to switch back to white, and we're going to do 3 stitches with white. And your final or third stitch should be right on top of that blue stitch of the previous row. I'm then going to switch back to blue, and we're going to do 1 stitch of blue, and then back to white, and then we're going to do 1 stitch of white, which brings us right up to this blue stitch sort of in the core of the flower, which we're going to place another blue stitch on top of. So I'm switching back to blue. Here's 1 blue stitch right in that core of the flower. We're then going to go back to white. Here's 1 white stitch, back to blue, and now into the stitch right before this blue stitch of the previous row, you want to place 1 blue stitch. We're then going to switch back to the white yarn, and I'm now going to do 3 stitches of white yarn, and then this third stitch here should bring you up flush with the very last blue stitch of this flower. So I'm going to go ahead and do 1 stitch of blue on top of that previous blue stitch. I'm then going to switch back to white, that way we can then begin our next flower. And now your design should be looking like this. For this next row of the flower pattern, you're going to single crochet with the base color, which for me is white, all the way until you're on top of the very first blue stitch of the flower. So right onto this stitch here, I'm going to do an uncompleted single crochet, so I can then switch over to my blue and pull that through the loops. So now we're going to go ahead and do 1 stitch of blue and then switch right back to white, where I'm then going to do 3 stitches of white, which should bring you right on top of this blue stitch here. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to blue. We're going to do 1 stitch of blue, back to white, 1 stitch of white, which should be on top of this blue stitch of the previous row, and then I'm going back to blue to do 1 stitch of blue, like so. I'm then going to switch back to white, and we're going to do 3 stitches of white, which in this last stitch I'm going to switch back to blue, do 1 blue stitch, and then switch right back to white. And that should bring you right up to the very last stitch of blue in that previous row for that flower. So then we're going to go ahead and just single crochet all the way over to the next flower, and then repeat that same process for the rest of the row. And now for our next row of this flower design, just like we did before, I'm going to place a single crochet of white all the way up until I reach the very first blue stitch of each flower, and then I'm going to place 1 as well on top of that blue stitch of the previous row, but I'm not going to complete it because instead I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my blue yarn. And now we're going to do 3 stitches of blue, and that third stitch should land right before the blue stitch of the previous row. I'm then going to go ahead and switch over to white, and we're going to do 3 stitches of white yarn, which the last of these 3 stitches should land on this blue stitch of the previous row. I'm then going to switch back over to blue, and we're going to go ahead and do 3 stitches of blue yarn, which the third stitch here should land right before the blue stitch of the previous row. So then I can switch back to white, and we can go ahead and place single crochets of white yarn all the way over to the next flower. And then you're going to go ahead and repeat that exact same stitch pattern all the way down to the end of the row. For this next row of the flower, I'm going to be working with my white single crochets all the way up until I am just 1 stitch away from the very first blue stitch in the former row, and I'm going to go ahead and switch over to blue. And then I'm going to place 1 blue stitch here right before the blue that starts in the previous row. And then before I can continue, I'm going to switch back to white, and then I'm going to place 3 stitches of white, which should line up perfectly with these stitches of blue in that previous row. In that third stitch, I'm going to switch back over to blue, and I'm going to place 1 stitch of blue, and then switching back over to white, do 1 stitch of white, switch back over to blue, 1 stitch of blue, switch back over to white, and now we should be lined up with this next section of 3 blue stitches in the previous row, which we can then place 3 white stitches on top of those 3 blue stitches. In this last stitch, I'm then going to switch over to blue and place 1 final stitch for this flower in blue. I'm then going to switch over to white, and then we're moving on to the next flower, and then I will continue that same stitch pattern for the rest of the flowers in the row, and at this point your design should be looking like this. And now for this next row of flower design, I'm going to single crochet with my white yarn up until I am 1 stitch away from the first blue stitch of the flower, which is where I'm at right now. So now I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my blue yarn, and then I'm going to do 1 blue stitch and then switch right back over to white, where we're then going to do 3 stitches with the white yarn. And on that third stitch, I'm going to switch right back over to blue, and then I'm going to place one blue stitch, and then we're going to do one stitch in blue and then switch right back over to white. And if it's lined up correctly, then you should be placing this white stitch right onto the blue stitch of the previous row, like so, and then switch right back over to blue, which this blue stitch should be placed on top of the white stitch of the previous row. And then from the blue, I'm going to switch back to white, and then that one stitch of white on top of the blue stitch of the previous row. I'm then going to switch back to blue. I'm going to do one stitch of blue and then switch over to white, and then 3 stitches of white, which your third stitch should land on top of the blue stitch of the previous row, that very last blue stitch of the flower. And I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my blue yarn, and then we're going to finally do just one stitch here of blue, and then I'm switching over to white, and I'm going to continue on to the next flower and repeat that exact same stitch pattern all the way down for the rest of the row. For this row, I'm going to single crochet with my white or my base color up until I reach the stitch right before the colored stitch here, that blue stitch of the previous row. And now I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my blue yarn. So then I can place one blue stitch right on top of the blue stitch of that previous row, and then switch right back over to my white yarn. I'm then going to do 2 stitches with the white yarn, and after that second stitch, I'm going to switch right back to my blue yarn. I'm then going to do 1 stitch of blue, and then switch back to white. I am then going to do 2 stitches of white and switch back to blue. And now if it's lined up correctly, then you should have this one blue stitch going right on top of the same blue stitch of the previous row. So I'm going to go ahead and do that one blue stitch and then switch right back to white, like so. I'm then going to do 2 stitches of white before switching right back to blue. And then I'm going to do 1 stitch of blue, switch back to white, 2 stitches of white, switch back to blue, and then this final 1 stitch of blue should be right on top of the blue stitch at the end of the flower in the previous row. So I'm going to go ahead and do that one last stitch of blue and then switch back to white, and I'm ready to continue on to the next flower and repeat that same process. For this next row, I'm going to single crochet with my white yarn all the way up until I'm on top of this very first colored blue stitch from the previous row. So I've completed that there, and I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my blue yarn. And then we're going to do the next 2 stitches in blue. So right on top of these 2 white stitches, I'm going to be placing 2 blue stitches, which should bring you right up to this next blue stitch of the previous row. So I'm then going to switch right over to white. And now these next 3 stitches are going to be with the white yarn. I'm going to switch over to my blue yarn here on that 3rd stitch. And now into this blue stitch of the previous row, I'm going to place 1 more blue stitch here. I'm then switching right back to white. And I'm going to do 3 stitches with the white yarn, and that 3rd stitch should land on the blue stitch of the previous row, where I'm then going to go ahead and switch right back to blue. And now these next 2 stitches are going to be in blue. I'm switching back to white, and now the very first stitch here of my white yarn should be right into the last colored stitch of the last row. So this is my very last stitch for the flower in the last row, and that's where I'm then placing this white stitch. And I'm then going to single crochet with my base yarn over to the other flower, where I will repeat that exact same process. For this next row, I'm going to single crochet with my base or my white yarn up until I am on top of the very first of the blue stitches. So right here we have our 2 stitches of blue from the previous row. I'm going to insert my hook and do 1 stitch of white on top of that very first of the 2 blue stitches. I am then going to go ahead and switch over to my blue yarn, and on top of the second of those 2 blue stitches, I'm going to place 1 blue stitch and then switch right back to the white yarn. I'm then going to do 2 stitches with the white yarn and switch over to blue. We're going to do 1 stitch of blue, switch over to white, and then do 1 stitch of white, which should line up to be on top of this blue stitch of the previous row. So I'm doing 1 stitch of white and then switching back to blue. So I'm then going to do 1 stitch of blue and then switch right back to white. I'm then going to do 2 stitches of white, 2, I'm switching back to blue, and this should bring us to those 2 stitches at the end of the flower of the previous row. So into the very first of those 2 stitches, I'm going to place 1 blue stitch and then switch over to white. And now I'm going to go ahead and single crochet with this white all the way over to the next flower, and repeat this same process all the way down the rest of the row with the rest of the flowers. We are now on to the very last row here of the flower design. So for this row, I am single crocheting with that white yarn all the way up until I am on top of the very first blue stitch here of the flower. So I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook right into that blue stitch, pull up some white yarn, and then switch right over to the blue yarn. Then going to place 2 stitches of blue yarn, which should be in line with these 2 stitches of white yarn in the previous row. I'm going to switch right over to my white yarn, and then I'm going to place 3 white stitches. I'm then going to switch over to blue, and this should be lined up here with these 2 white stitches of the previous row, which I'm then going to place 2 blue stitches, which this brings us right next to the very last stitch of the flower. I'm then going to switch right over to white, and I'm going to place a white single crochet right into that last stitch of the flower, and then I'm going to go ahead and single crochet stitch all the way over to the next flower. So this is what your design should be looking like right now, and I'm going to go ahead and finish off the rest of this row, and then we'll move on to the rest of the sweater. And now we're going to go ahead and complete those last few rows of the design. So right now I'm just doing 1 row of solid white single crochet all the way across, and like always I am carrying that blue yarn with me so that way it's at the other end of the row once I'm done. And then for this next row, just like we've done several times already in this project, I'm going to go ahead and switch colors with every single stitch. So I'm switching from white to blue, from blue to white, from white to blue, just back and forth every single stitch all the way down this 1 row. And now my last stitch of this row is going to be with the dark blue, which is perfect. But if you're ending on your base color, you're going to want to switch now over to the accent color, so then you can chain 1 and turn your work. And now I'm just going to do 1 solid row, all of single crochets here with the dark blue yarn. And like always, I'm going to carry that white yarn with me over to the other side. In this next row, I'm going to be switching colors in every single stitch yet again, only this time I'm going to be doing this opposite to the previous row. So last time that we switched colors every single stitch, you can see I have white, blue, white, blue. So now this time I'm going to do blue, white, blue, white. So every single stitch all the way down to the end of the row, I'm going to be switching colors back and forth. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish up this row, and I'll see you once I'm done with that. Now this next row is going to be entirely made up of the white yarn or whatever your base color is. So this entire row, I'm just going to place a single crochet into every single stitch all the way across, carrying that blue yarn with me, of course, as I always do. And I'm going to see you once I reach the end of the row. On this very last stitch of the row, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my dark blue yarn so I can then chain 1 and turn my work. And now this first stitch of the row I'm going to do with my dark blue yarn and then switch right back over to the white yarn. And right here we're going to start making those little diamonds or plus signs that we've made previously. So now I'm going to go ahead and complete these next 4 stitches with white yarn. And here in our 4th stitch, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the blue yarn. And then I'm going to do 1 stitch of blue, switch back to white, and then 4 stitches of white. And you're going to follow that exact same pattern of 4 white, 1 blue, all the way down to the end of the row. Now for this next row, we're going to make those sort of like capital T shapes here in the row, just like we did before. So I'm going to go ahead and single crochet with my white yarn up until I am 1 stitch away from that very first blue yarn stitch. And now right here where I'm 1 stitch away, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my dark blue yarn. So now I'm going to place 3 stitches with the blue yarns, making that sort of capital T shape, like so. I'm then going to switch over to my white yarn. And now here I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my dark blue, where I can then place my 3 blue stitches before, during, and after that blue stitch of the previous row. And I'm going to go ahead and repeat that same pattern all the way down for the rest of the row. And now we are on to that final row of the design for the front panel of our sweater, which I'm just finishing up that little plus sign or diamond design here, which I'm going to do by single crocheting with my white yarn up until I'm on top of the very first of these 3 blue stitches of the previous row. So now the first of these 3 blue stitches gets 1 single crochet in the white, and then I'm going to switch over to my blue yarn. So then in the middle of these 3 stitches, I can place 1 blue stitch and then switch back to white, therefore making a little plus sign or a little diamond shape. And I'm then going to crochet with my white or my base color over to the next spot here, and I'm going to place 1 single crochet right into the very first of those 3 blue stitches of the previous row. I'm then going to switch over to my blue yarn, and into the very middle of those 3 stitches we're going to place 1 blue stitch and then switch right back to the white yarn to then continue on and do that exact same pattern all the way down to the end of the row, which should leave your design looking like this. So at this point, this is what your design should be looking like, and I went ahead and cast it off with that blue yarn after I completed that last row. I then did an additional 9 rows of single crochet at the top here, and you can do as many rows as you want until the piece is tall enough, and then you're going to go ahead and mark the collar. So to mark where we want the collar, I'm going to take my crochet panel here, and I'm holding it up where the top part is in line with my collarbone. So right where my collarbone is, I'm holding it right up there flush with my collarbone. I'm going to go ahead and mark kind of where I want the collar to start. So I'm just going to kind of estimate, and I'm going to use the already existing straps I have here for my tank top as a guideline. So then I'm going to go ahead and place a stitch marker about here and one like about here. And now that I have that marked, we can go back to our crochet station, make sure they're even, and actually start the collar itself. So now that I have my collar marked with these 2 bobby pins here on both sides, you're going to want to go ahead and count the number of stitches from this corner to the first stitch marker or bobby pin, and then from this corner to the next stitch marker or bobby pin, and just make sure that it's the same number of stitches on both sides. You might need to move these over 1 or 2 stitches to make sure it's even, but once you have concluded that your stitch markers are in the correct spot, we can begin working on the collar. So I'm going to go right back and pick up that yarn. So I'm going to start by simply working my way towards that first stitch marker with just single crochets here. And I'm going to pause here where I am just 1 stitch away from that stitch marker, and we're going to go ahead and do a decrease. So I'm going to remove my bobby pin or my stitch marker. I'm going to insert my hook right into this next stitch, pick up my yarn as if I'm about to do a single crochet, but before I complete that stitch, I'm going to insert my hook right into the next stitch, and then pick up my yarn. So now I have 3 loops here on my hook, and I'm going to go ahead and pull through all 3 loops like so, therefore making a decrease, because what we just did was made these 2 stitches into 1 stitch. So I'm then going to go ahead and chain 1, and I'm going to turn my work, and now just like we just did, I'm going to insert my hook right into that first stitch, pick up my yarn, and then before I can complete that stitch, I'm going to insert my hook into the next stitch, pick up some yarn. So I have 3 loops on my hook. I'm going to then pull through all 3 loops, therefore completing another decrease. I'm then going to just single crochet like normal all the way down back to the end of this row here. So now at the end of the row here, I'm going to go ahead and just chain 1 and then turn my work. And now I'm going to simply repeat that same process where I'm going to place single crochets all the way down until I reach the last 2 stitches of this row, where I'm then going to do a decrease where I combine the 2 stitches together as I demonstrated previously, and then I will turn my work, complete another decrease, and work my way back. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple rows here with the decreases, and I'll see you once I'm done with that. So here I have completed one side of the collar. I went ahead and did 8 rows with the decrease, and then I did 2 normal rows without the decrease because the collar was starting to get too wide for my liking, but I did need a little bit more height. So I did those 2 extra rows without the decrease, and you want this portion to be about 2.5 inches long or so. So basically when you hold this up to the front of your body with the collar in place where it should be, the top row here of this shoulder should land right on the top middle portion of your shoulder. So when you have the other panel coming in here, the seam at the top will be right in the middle of your shoulder. So again, that's going to be about 2.5 inches, but just hold it up to your body and make sure you have the right amount of height here on the shoulder. And so that's exactly what I have. So I'm going to go ahead and cast off. I already chained 1. I'm going to cut my yarn, leaving a bit of a tail so I can weave it in later. And I'm going to go ahead and just cast off of that side of the sweater. And so now I'm going over to the other side of our panel here where we have our other stitch marker. I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook right into the first stitch in this corner. And then I'm going to cast on with that white yarn, and I'm going to go ahead and do that exact same thing that we just did on the other side. So I'm going to single crochet all the way up until I'm 1 stitch away from the stitch marker. Okay, so now here I am just about 1 stitch away from my stitch marker. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that stitch marker, and just like we did on the other side, I'm going to go ahead and decrease. I'm then going to chain 1 and turn my work. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing on this side as I did on the other side. So I'm going to then decrease starting off, and I'm going to do the exact same number of rows of decreasing that I did on the other side of the collar. And so now here I have the other collar or shoulder portion completed with the exact same number of rows as I did on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and cast off with this color as well. Now, I don't think I can fit it entirely on the camera here, but this is going to be your first panel then completed. And now you're going to do the exact same thing for another panel. Now that I have completed both of my panels, I'm going to go ahead and attach them right at the collar. So I'm going to go ahead and lay each panel down one on top of the other, and I'm making sure I have the right sides together. So the messy side here is going to be face up on both sides, and then the clean part of our design is on the inside. I'm then going to go ahead and find the top of the collar here where we have our two shoulder portions. We have this one and then the one on this side. I'm going to go ahead and just attach both of these together. So to attach the shoulders together, you can either just use some yarn and a needle and just sew along the top here, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch these together because that goes a lot faster and I really do not like sewing. So I prefer just to slip stitch everything when I crochet. So I'm going to do that by inserting my hook into the very first stitch here on our first panel, and then going over to the second panel and picking up the very first stitch of that second panel. So both of these shoulder portions of the two panels should be lined up perfectly even, and I have both of the stitches here right on my hook. I am then going to bring some yarn through, and I'm just going to chain one to lock it in place, and now we're all set to slip stitch along the rest of the top here. So now I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook right into that next stitch, the second stitch of that first panel, and then I'm going to the second panel, picking up the second stitch of the second panel. I'm then going to go ahead and pick up some more yarn, and I'm going to pull it through all of the loops on my hook, therefore completing a slip stitch. And I'm going to do this with every single stitch all the way down both panels. And I keep my tension very loose as I work my way down this shoulder, because if the tension is too tight, the material is going to kind of bunch up and you're going to have weird ripples in your shoulder portion. So in order to keep it all laying smooth and flat, I just keep my tension very loose. That way the material has room to move. So then after I've connected those last two stitches here, I'm going to go ahead and chain one and then just cut my yarn to cast off. I'm now going to flip my work. So now we have the other shoulder portion here, and this side is still not connected, so I'm going to line them up correctly so that all the stitches are lined up on both sides of the panels. And then I'm going to do that exact same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and just insert my hook right into that first stitch on both panels, like so. I'm then going to pull that yarn through and chain one to lock it in place. And then just like I did on the other side, I'm going to slip stitch into every single stitch all the way down the rest of this shoulder portion. And then just like on the other side, after I'm done slip stitching into that very last stitch, I'm going to chain one and then cut my yarn to cast off. So now you're going to want to go ahead and try on this piece. Make sure you like the way it fits. And then what you're going to do is kind of pinch the side of the project, pinch the two panels together under your arm until you find where you want the sleeve to start. I then went ahead and marked that row with a bobby pin or a stitch marker here. I also went ahead and marked the exact same spot on the other side of that panel. I have both sides marked right here at about like the middle to the top of the flower design, and I have the exact same stitch marker on the other side, which where I marked the start of the armhole here for reference is about 7.5 inches down from the top of the shoulder. So now we're going to go ahead and work our way up along the side here to this stitch marker so we can begin the sleeve. So I'm going all the way down to the bottom of these two panels, and I'm going to make sure that they're completely lined up here, that the designs are lined up on both sides. And I am then going to go ahead and insert my hook into that very bottom stitch there of the first panel, and I'm going to go over to the other side and find that exact same stitch on the other side. I'm going to insert my hook into the first stitch on both sides of both panels. I'm now going to bring in my white yarn, or whatever your base color is here. I'm going to pick up that yarn and pull it through both stitches and then chain one to lock it in place. So again, keeping my tension very loose and then also keeping the panels perfectly lined up on both sides, I'm just going to go ahead and slip stitch all the way up the side of both panels until I reach that stitch marker that we placed here towards the top of the sweater. I have now slip stitched all the way up the side of the sweater here, and I have reached the stitch marker. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove that stitch marker. And now you can see we have this opening here for the sleeve. So now we are perfectly set up here with our yarn and our hook at the very bottom of the opening of the sleeve. So I don't have to cast off or anything. We can just get started on the sleeve. So I'm going to go ahead and chain one. And after you have chained one, I'm actually going to go ahead and flip the sweater right side out so that this design is facing the outside. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up my hook again with that yarn, and this first row we're just going to go ahead and place one single crochet into every single stitch all the way around this opening here. So starting in this very first stitch, I'm just going to insert my hook and place one single crochet into every single one of these stitches all the way around the opening of the sleeve. Okay, and I have now reached the end of that row. I'm placing a single crochet right into the last stitch, and here you can see that first stitch where we started off on this row. I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook right into that first stitch, pick up some yarn, and slip stitch, therefore making it one round row. I'm then going to go ahead and chain one, and now just like before, I'm going to go ahead and flip the entire sweater back inside out so the wrong side of this design is facing the outside. Alright, so now I have it flipped with the wrong side facing out again, and the only reason why I flipped it inside out that first time is because otherwise the seam for the sleeve is a little bit weird when it sits onto the sweater. So that very first row of the sleeve you want to do with the right side facing out just to make the seam sit better. So I'm going to go ahead and start by doing this next row, and this next row I'm going to start off with a decrease because we do want to make this sleeve just a little bit more narrow. So I already, whether I'm decreasing or not, skip the stitch here that our chain one comes out of. This is the stitch that we slip stitched into. You're going to skip that in every single row, whether it's a decrease or not. So then into this next stitch is where you typically would then begin the next row, but because we're decreasing, I'm going to skip that one as well and go into the third stitch here. So right into this stitch, I'm going to then place a single crochet. So I skipped over the first stitch of the project, and so that is our decrease, and I'm then going to go ahead and place a single crochet into every single stitch all the way around this opening back to the start of the row. One thing I forgot to mention also, when you're working on the sleeve, you want to make sure you're working from the inside out with your hook. So I have the handle of my hook facing the middle of the sleeve with the top of my hook facing out. So instead of working in this way, I'm working this way. And that will be important once you get to the design, just to make sure you have it facing the right way and you're working from the right side of the sleeve. So just make sure you're working from the inside of the sleeve, not the outside. Okay, so now that I've reached the end of my row, I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook right into that first stitch we made of that row, and I'm going to slip stitch together, therefore completing my row. I'm then going to chain one and turn my work. And that is all there is to it for the sleeve. You're just going to continue working in a round in that same way. We're going to place a single crochet into every single stitch and then slip stitch at the end and turn your work. And now when it comes to decreasing the sleeve and making it a little bit more narrow, you only want to decrease in every other row, not every single row, because when you decrease, that is going to cinch in the project. You are eliminating an entire stitch from the row. So if you decrease in every single row, it's going to be a drastic change where the sleeve just immediately cinches in. So in order to avoid that and have it be a more gradual slope where you're bringing the sleeve and sort of tapering it in, you want to decrease in every other row instead of every single row. So in this next row, instead of skipping this stitch, I'm going to insert my hook right into that stitch and then go ahead and start doing a normal row of single crochet. And then in the next row, I'm going to skip that stitch, therefore completing a decrease. So in every other row, I'm going to do a decrease, and I'm going to go ahead and do a couple rows here with both the normal crochet and then the decrease row, and I'm going to keep track of how many rows I am doing and whether or not they are decreased. Okay, so I've now finished with my decrease rows. I have done 8 rows since the beginning of the sleeve, which means 4 of those rows had a decrease. So I've done 4 decreases so far, and that brings the sleeve to be about 9 inches across when it's just laid flat like so. And it still looks a little bit funky when I'm trying it on just because it's still quite a short sleeve, but the opening here I've decided is the perfect width. So I'm going to stop here with my decreases, and now I'm just going to continue my rows like normal without any decrease. And I'm going to continue doing rows here until the sleeve reaches a couple inches above my elbow. I went ahead and did 20 rows here of just regular crochet, no decreases, so then when I try this on, the sleeve lands just a little bit above my elbow. So now we can go ahead and add our very first design for the sleeve. So I'm going to be bringing back tapestry crochet, and I'm also going to be repeating the exact same design that we did at the start of the sweater, the design here at the very bottom, with that sort of zigzag line and then the diamond or plus sign designs in the middle, and then that zigzag line again at the top to finish it off. I will be putting the graph up here on the screen so you can follow along. And now remember that with tapestry crochet, there is always a right and a wrong side. And in order to keep your design crisp and clear, you want to make sure that the yarn you're working with, the loose yarn here, is on the wrong side at all times. So the inside of the sleeve is going to be the right side because we're going to be turning our sweater inside out. And then the outside of the sleeve is the wrong side. So make sure your design is implemented in a way that the inside of the sleeve is the right side, the outside is the wrong side. So now I'm going to go ahead and follow the graph that I have here on the screen to complete this design for the sleeve, and I'll see you once I'm done making the design. So here I have my design completed, and now I already went ahead and casted off the blue color here, and I'm just going to repeat the exact same thing I did before, where I'm just doing a couple rows here of just simple single crochet all the way around. I'm not doing any decreases, I'm just doing normal rows, and I'm going to continue doing these rows until the sleeve reaches the bottom of the sweater. So until I have the sleeve in line with this design here at the bottom of my sweater, I'm going to go ahead and just continue making rows until it reaches that length. So I went ahead and just added another 30 rows here of the plain white single crochet, which brings the sleeve to be about 7 inches long from the design down to the bottom of the sleeve. And when I try this on, the sleeve lands right at the top of the bottom design on the sweater, which is perfect because now we can repeat the exact same design that we did higher up here on the sleeve, now at this portion of the sleeve. And this is going to be gorgeous because this design will line up with the bottom of the design of the sweater and create one just cohesive line of the design across the sweater, and it looks so pretty. So now I'm going to go ahead and bring back in my blue yarn, and I'm just going to go ahead and do tapestry crochet just like I did before. I'm going to do the exact same design that I did up here at the top of the sleeve, and I'll see you once I'm done with that design. And so here is that sleeve with the second design completed. So we've got both designs here. I also went ahead and did one row of just plain white crochet as well at the bottom. And when you try on the sweater, the sleeve should land about an inch or two above your wrist. That way we have plenty of room to do the ribbing at the bottom of the sleeve. So once that's done, you're going to go ahead and make a second sleeve using the exact same number of rows and stitch count, which I already did here. You're going to do the same thing where you slip stitch up the side of the project and then work in a round to make this sleeve with the same number of rows that you did with the first sleeve. So now we can get started on the ribbing details for the sweater, and I'm going to start working on the collar. I'm going to pick one of these two shoulders. I'm just going to go with this one to the right, and I'm going to insert my hook right into one of these stitches here along the shoulder portion where the two panels come together. So right into this first stitch here, I'm just going to insert my hook. It doesn't really matter which stitch you pick, you just want it to be right at that shoulder portion of the project. I'm then going to bring in my yarn and I'm going to pull this through. And now you're going to chain as many chains as you want the collar to be tall, with one additional chain that we use for turning. So I'm going to be doing 8 chains because I want the collar to be 7 chains tall. So I'm going to do 8. And now we're going to be working right back into that same chain back towards the project. So I'm going to be placing one single crochet into every single one of these chain stitches back to the collar of the sweater. So I have now placed my last single crochet stitch into this chain here. I'm going to go back to the stitches here along the collar, and this stitch is where our chain is coming out of. So I'm going to go right into the next stitch, insert my hook, and then slip stitch. Like so, and that's going to bring this chain section flush with the collar of the sweater. I am then going to go into the very next stitch here, and I'm going to again slip stitch, and then I'm going to turn my work. So now we can work our way back up this same little single crochet section that we've been making. And now typically into this very first stitch, you would just insert your hook and pick up some yarn and do a single crochet. But because we're doing a rib crochet, instead of just going into the whole stitch here, I'm going to flip my work so I can see the top of the project. And at the top, you can see that there's 2 loops that make up one stitch. There's 2 strands of yarn. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up the back strand of the yarn. And I'm going to insert my hook and then do a single crochet into that back strand. So again, into this next stitch, instead of going into the entire stitch, I'm going to go up to the top here and then insert my hook right in between those 2 strands of yarn, picking up the back loop and then doing a single crochet. And that's how you create that sort of elastic rib shape. And now at the very top of the project here, into our very last stitch, I'm going to insert my hook as I normally would without a rib crochet. So I'm going to pick up both strands of that loop and just place a normal single crochet. So I then chained one, and I'm going to turn my work, And then we're going to work our way back down to the sweater in the same manner. So in this very first stitch, I'm doing a normal single crochet. And then into the next stitch, instead of doing a single crochet, I'm going to go up to the top of the project, pick up just the back loop, and then do my single crochet into just the back loop. And now at the bottom of the row, we have the body of the sweater here. I'm going to insert my hook right into the next stitch, and I'm going to slip stitch, therefore securing this ribbed portion back down to the collar. I'm then going into the stitch right after it. I'm going to slip stitch again, like so. I'm then going to turn my work and then rib crochet all the way back up with a single crochet at the very first stitch, and then chain one and work my way all the way back down. So I'm just going to continue doing these little rows of rib crochet all the way around the collar, and I'll see you once I reach the end of the collar for the sweater. And here is the ribbing for that collar completed. I worked it all the way around. It fits so much better now than it did before we added the collar. And here you can see where I ended with the ribbing, and I'm just going to leave this part open here, and we're going to go ahead and cast off. I'm going to leave quite a bit of yarn in the tail when I cut the yarn. That way we can use that to sew up the collar later. Once I'm done adding the ribbing to the entire sweater, I'm going to go back with this loose yarn and just stitch the two sides together back down to the sweater. That way it can be one solid circle of ribbing. And then I'm also going to add the same ribbing to the bottom of the sweater. So I'm just going to find one of these points here where I connected the panels, and I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook right into one of those stitches. I'm then just going to bring my yarn back and pull it right through. And I'm going to do the exact same number of chains I did for the ribbing at the top of the collar. That way the ribbing can be the same height in every portion of the sweater. So I did 8 chains before, so I'm going to do 8 chains again, like so. And then just like before, I'm going to start by just placing a single crochet into every single chain stitch all the way back down to the sweater. And now into this next stitch, I'm going to insert my hook and then slip stitch, bringing this portion of our single crochets flush with the sweater. I'm then going into the stitch right after that one, and I'm again going to slip stitch and then turn my work. And then like I did with the collar, I'm simply going to place one rib crochet into every single stitch up to the top. And then once I reach that 7th or that top stitch of the row, I'm going to do just one single crochet instead of a rib crochet. I'm then going to chain one, turn my work, start the row with that single crochet, and then rib crochet right back down to the project where I can then slip stitch into the next 2 stitches and then work my way back up, and repeat that process all the way along the bottom of this sweater as well as the bottom of both sleeves. So I'm going to go ahead and finish adding this rib crochet to the bottom of the sweater and the bottom of the sleeves, and I'll see you once the entire sweater is completed with the rib crochet borders. Okay, so now that the ribbing is completed on both the collar, both the sleeves, and the bottom of the sweater, you're going to want to take those loose ends that we have from casting off originally and just thread a needle through that yarn and stitch up the ribbing together to make those closed circles, which as you can see here I already completed on my sweater. So after that's completed, I'm now going to go ahead and just weave in all of these loose ends before flipping the sweater right side out so we can have our pretty design in the front. And that pretty much just sums up how to make this sweater. So I'm going to go ahead and weave in all these loose ends, and then I'll show you the final results. Now that we have completed the adorable crochet sweater, let's go ahead and get started on the pants. So this part is completely optional, but I do recommend just getting yourself a little piece of elastic like this so we can put this into the waistband of the pants, because crochet does tend to stretch over time, and it also can be a little bit on the heavier side. So just to make sure that the pants actually stay up and that they're comfortable even after you've worn them many times, I do recommend just putting a little bit of elastic into the waistband, and I will show you exactly how to do that throughout this tutorial. So again, this is optional but highly recommended. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get started on the tutorial for the matching pants. And just like with the sweater, I'll be using weight 4 acrylic yarn as well as a 5mm crochet hook for the pants, and I will be using mostly the white acrylic yarn, but you will need a little bit of that blue for the design later on. But I will again put the details of exactly how much yarn I used in the description down below. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm just going to start off by casting on. And now the first thing we're going to make is the waistband that goes around the top of the pants. And you're going to go ahead and chain for the width of the waistband that you want, but then double that number. So for instance, I like to have 9 chains here. 7, 8, 9. These 9 chains make up about the width of a normal waistband that I would want for the pants, but we're going to go ahead and double that, and I'm going to turn this into 18 chains. So I'm going to do another 9 chains. like so. So now we have a full longer chain. We doubled that 9 up into 18. And so whatever number you decide to do for the width of the waistband, go ahead and double that. And now we're going to go ahead and make one turning chain, like so. And then into every single stitch all the way back to the start of this chain, we're just going to place one single crochet. So I'm just going to do 18 single crochets, one in each chain all the way back to the start. And now at the end of the row here, I'm going to go ahead and chain one and then turn my work. And now just like I demonstrated before in the sweater portion of this tutorial, we're going to do just a rib crochet. Also, let me address the elephant in the room. Yes, I painted my nails. I was having fun with doing some little design, and this hand is a little bit whack because I'm not left-handed. So just don't look at this nail. Just admire this one throughout this tutorial. So anyways, after you have turned your project, you're then going to do rib crochet, which I did already demonstrate the rib crochet when we made the sweater previously. But basically all you do is you tip the project up to the top and you look at the 2 loops at the top, and you're going to just pick up just the back loop of that stitch and then place a single crochet into just the back loop of each stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and just rib crochet all the way down the rest of this row. So now that I have reached the end of the row here, I'm going to go ahead and chain one and then turn my work, and then we're just going to repeat that exact same thing. So I'm going to do another row of just rib crochet, picking up just the back loop and rib crocheting all the way down, and you're just going to repeat this for a while. You're going to do many rows of just rib crochet until this part here is long enough that you can wrap it all the way around your waist as a normal waistband would. So once you have your waistband completed, you're going to go ahead and measure it just to make sure it is going to fit properly before we commit to making the rest of the pants. So you're going to take the waistband and you're just going to fold it in half like so. So it's going to be half the size, like this. And then you're going to wrap it around your waist. And obviously you want to do this when you don't have the extra fabric here so you can get a proper measurement. But you're just going to wrap it around your waist like so, bringing both ends together, and make sure that you like the way that fits, that that's pretty nice and secure. And then pinching both sides together like so, just try taking it down like over your hips and off of your legs to make sure it will fit all the way down and you can slide it on and off like a normal pair of pants. So this is the perfect measurement for me. So now we can go back to our table and go ahead and get started on the rest of the pair of pants. Okay, so now that we have the waistband figured out, we're going to go ahead and get started on the actual pants itself. So just like when we were trying on the waistband, you're going to go ahead and just fold it in half like so, because this way once we're done we can thread the elastic right through this sort of empty space that we're making in between. So we're going to fold it in half and just start placing single crochets all the way around. So I'm going to insert my hook right into the first stitch here, and then I'm going to pick up the exact same stitch on the other side. So I'm perfectly lining it up, and I should have 2 stitches there on my hook, and then I'm just going to place a single crochet like so. And then again I'm going into the second stitch and I'm going to pick up the same stitch on the other side and then a single crochet. And you're just going to do this all the way down the entire waistband, holding these 2 sides together and therefore folding the waistband in half. So I'm going to go ahead and just single crochet all the way down this entire waistband, securing it as it's folded in half, and I'll see you once I'm done with this row. So I have now completed that first row of single crochets all the way down this entire waistband, so it's now secured perfectly in half like so. And now we're going to go ahead and turn this into the perfect circle. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring the start of our row back like so, sort of making that circle, and I'm going to insert my hook right into the very first single crochet that we made right here, and then I'm going to slip stitch. So I'm just picking up some yarn and pulling it through all of the loops, therefore slip stitching. The top of the waistband here you can see is still open, and we're going to leave it open like this until we are completely done with the pants. Then we're going to add the elastic and sew it together. So for now, just leave this completely open. And now we're going to go ahead and add our stitch markers. I'm just going to be using some bobby pins. So what I'm going to do is just lay my project down flat, and I'm going to kind of estimate where each side is. So I'm just going to place one stitch marker here and then sort of estimate where it is on the other side perfectly lined up, and then place another stitch marker like so. So I now have my stitch markers or my bobby pins here just roughly placed on either side. I am now going to go ahead and count the number of stitches I have from this side to this side, and then on the back of the project from this side to this side, to make sure that the stitch markers are evenly spaced on both sides. And then if they're not evenly spaced, I'm just going to adjust them slightly until there's the same number of stitches between each stitch marker. Okay, so after I counted, I have realized that I have 54 stitches on the front here and then 51 stitches on the back. So I'm just going to slightly adjust this stitch marker here. I'm going to move this over one space So we have 53 on the front, 52 on the back, and then I'm going to move this one over one space as well. So then I will have 52 on the front and 52 on the back. So now we have both of our stitch markers evenly spaced, and now I'm going to go ahead and get started on our next row here. So I'm going to bring my hook back, and then right into these single crochets that we made in the last row, I'm just going to go ahead and place a single crochet into every single stitch all the way up until I reach that very first stitch marker. So just as we did before, we're just doing simple single crochets all the way along this row until I reach that very first bobby pin or stitch marker. So now that I've reached the bobby pin here, I'm just going to remove this really quickly, and now into this stitch that we had marked, we're going to do an increase. So I'm going to place just a single crochet as normal, and then into that exact same stitch, I'm going to insert my hook and then place another single crochet. So we just turned one stitch into two. I'm then going to get my stitch marker and I'm going to remark the first of those two stitches. So we place two stitches in here, and I'm just going to mark the first one of those two. So that way we remember we want to increase again once we come back around. I'm then going to go ahead and just place a single crochet into every single stitch as normal all the way around until I reach the stitch marker on the other side of the waistband here. So now I have reached my next stitch marker here, and so like before, I'm just going to remove it really quickly. And then into this stitch, we're going to do an increase. So I'm going to do one normal single crochet and then reinsert my hook right into the exact same stitch and place another single crochet. And then I'm going to bring that bobby pin back, and I'm going to go ahead and mark the first of those two stitches that we did, like so. And then I'm just going to single crochet as normal into every single stitch all the way around until I get back to where we started the row here. So now at the end of the row, I'm going to slip stitch into the very first single crochet that we made for the row. So I'm inserting my hook into that stitch and then pulling the yarn through and slip stitching. I'm then going to chain one and then turn my work. And now we're going to get started on the next row here. So into this next row, I'm going to place one single crochet into every single stitch like we did before, all the way until I reach that very first stitch marker. And now just like before, now that I've reached my stitch marker here, I'm going to go ahead and remove it for just a second. And into this stitch, I'm going to do an increase. So I'm going to do one single crochet and then reinsert my hook into the exact same stitch and then do a second single crochet. I'm then going to bring back my bobby pin or my stitch marker, and I'm going to remark the very first of those two single crochets that we did. And then just like before, I'm just going to single crochet into every single stitch all the way around until I reach the next stitch marker. And now at this next stitch marker, just like before, I'm going to remove this for a second, and now into this stitch we're going to do an increase. So I'm going to place two single crochets into this one stitch, and then I'm going to bring that stitch marker back and mark the first of those two single crochets. And then I'm going to go ahead and single crochet all the way back to the start of the row, and when you're working in a round, it can be kind of hard to tell where the row starts. So just keep a lookout for this little tiny bump here where we did that single crochet, so we brought up the height of the row just slightly. That is where the row started, and so you're just going to crochet all the way up until you reach that point there. So then right here, I have now single crocheted all the way up to the point where we previously started the row, and I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook into that very first stitch of the row that we made, that first single crochet, and I'm going to slip stitch like so, and then chain one and turn my work. And now you're going to repeat that exact same process, making sure that you are increasing on both stitch markers on both sides, and you're just going to continue doing this for several more rows. I have now completed 27 rows, and I have it to the point where the circumference here on the bottom row is the width that I need to just fit comfortably over my hips. And so I don't want it to be any wider, but I definitely need it to be longer before we can add that line for the crotch and then start on both of the individual legs. So before I can get to that point, I do need it to be a couple inches longer. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue doing what we were doing before, just single crochets in a round. Only this time I'm going to remove the bobby pins or stitch markers on both sides, and I'm not going to increase anymore because I'm at the circumference that I need here. It is as wide as I need it to be. I'm going to stop increasing, and now I'm just going to work straight down in the same way I've already demonstrated, just working in a round in single crochets, just straight down until we're at the length that we need, that we can then begin working on the individual legs. Okay, so I've now done 66 rows from the bottom of the waistband here all the way down to the bottom of the project, and it looks like this at this length. And then for reference, my knee is right here. So from my knee up, that is how long it is. It's kind of like a mini skirt length right now, which is the perfect length to go ahead and turn this into now two individual legs. So let's go do that. So at the end of this last row here, you do kind of want to pay attention to which direction you're ending on. So for instance, I'm putting in my last 2 stitches, and then I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch right into that first single crochet. And then I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work. And now this is the part we're going to sort of mentally document. So when I turn my work to start a new row, I'm just documenting the fact that when the seam here along the back of the pants is face up and the waistband is away from me, so the bottom of the pants is closest to me, then I am going to the left. And I am just going to keep a mental note of that because it is going to be important in just a little bit. But for now, we're going to go ahead and make the chain that is for the crotch portion of the pants. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 18, which I already have 1 chain here, so I'm just going to chain another 17. And you can just estimate for yourself how many chains you're going to need. It is quite easy to alter this part, so if you accidentally make it too long or too short, that's okay. You can fix it quite easily. So just give it a rough guess and then you can adjust it as needed. I am making a size small to kind of a size medium pair of pants, so I am chaining 18 for mine for reference, and if I was making a small, I'd probably do about 15. If I was making a proper medium, I'd probably do about 20. If I was making a large, I'd do like 24, 25, and then so on and so forth. So just using that as a rough estimate, make the number of chains that you think you're going to need because we can just try it on and change it as needed in a little bit here. So here I have my chain of 18, and now I'm laying the pants out completely flat, sort of estimating where the center would be. Because this chain is coming right from the middle seam here at the back of the pants, we know that this is dead center, and then we have to sort of estimate where dead center is on the other side as well. So I am just laying it out completely flat, and I'm just going to kind of guess which stitch here seems like the center. I'm going to insert my hook right into that stitch, and now I'm going to go ahead and count the stitches. So I'm going to count all the stitches from this side all the way around to where we insert that hook, and then I'm going to count all the stitches on this side from the chain here all the way around to that stitch we inserted the hook into, and I'm going to make sure it's the same number of stitches on both sides. Okay, so I have 91 stitches here along the right side of the pants, so now I'm going to go ahead and count the left side and see if that lines up. And then on the left side here, I got 85, so I just need to move my hook over 3 stitches so both sides can then have 87 stitches. So now we know that we are perfectly lined up and that this chain here is going from the perfect center on this side to the perfect center on this side. So now we're going to go ahead and attach this chain to this side of the pants. So I'm just flipping my work quick. And then I'm going to go ahead, pick up that yarn, and then slip stitch the chain to the body of the pants like so. I'm then going to chain 1, and now I'm going to pull this loop really big so then we can try on the pants. And now you want to take a second to try on these pants and make sure that you like the length of the chain here, because if it is too short or too long, now is the best time to very easily just pull this yarn, take this apart, and then change the number of chains, where once we start the next step, it's going to be a lot harder to go back and change this. So right now is a good time to quickly try on the pants and make sure you are happy with the length of this chain here, which if you are, we can then continue forward into the next step. So once you have tried on the pants and decided that you are indeed happy with the length of the chain, we can then do the next step, which is going to be to cast off. So I already did my chain 1 before to lock this in place. So all I'm going to do now is just cut my yarn, and then I'm just going to pull on this loop that we made until the yarn comes undone like so, therefore locking that in place and casting off. And the reason why we're casting off is because whenever you slip stitch in the back here when you're changing rows, it does cause a little bit of a seam, which is actually quite flattering for a pair of pants, because if you look at normal fabric made pants, they also have this seam going up the back of the pants because it really helps to hug your figure, and it is quite flattering. So the seam is actually a very good thing with these pants, and we're also going to have a seam on both legs, but we don't want the seam to go right down the front of the leg. We want it to be sort of the inside of the leg. So we had to cast off here so that the seam didn't take place right in the front of the leg. And now we can go ahead and cast back on to make our very first leg. And now is when we are going to recall that important information of which direction we were going in when we first ended the last row. So if you remember, as I said, I had my waistband facing away from me, the bottom of the pants facing towards me, and the seam face up meant we were going to the left. And it's important that you remember this because when you crochet back and forth, the stitches do look slightly different, and you can tell if you break that pattern. So if you're supposed to be going left and then you accidentally go right next, you're going to have sort of a seam here, and the stitches aren't going to look the same, and the leg portion of the pants are going to look quite different from the body of the pants. And you're going to see a distinct line where we attached the legs, and and we don't want that. So it's important that when we start the leg, we're going in the same direction that we end it on. So I am making sure that when we start the leg, I'm going to be going to the left, and then whichever way it lines up for your pants, make sure you are going the same direction that you were supposed to be going with the next row. I know I'm going to the left, so I'm going to do my first leg here on the left portion of the pants. And so I'm going to go into the chain here, and I'm going to rotate it so that if I'm starting from the chain, I can then work around to the left like so. And I'm going to find my very center chain. So I have a chain of 18, so I'm just going to go about 9 chains in here to the center. So here I have inserted my hook right into that center chain, and I'm going to go ahead and bring my white yarn back, and I'm just going to cast right back on. So I'm going to take that yarn, pick it up with the hook, and then pull it right through that chain stitch. Chain 1 to lock it in place. And now from this center chain back to the body of the pants, so these 9 chains here, I'm going to go ahead and place a single crochet into every single one of those chain stitches. So every single one of these chain stitches gets 1 single crochet until I reach the body of the pants. And so now here I have placed 1 single crochet from the middle of that chain all the way to the body of the pants, and now I'm working to the left, so I'm working this way. So I'm going to go ahead and place a single crochet into the first stitch along the main body of the pants here, going off to the left, like so. And now, just like we've been doing previously so many times before with the rest of the pants, I'm just going to go ahead and place a single crochet into every single stitch all the way around until I reach the other side of the chain here. So typically when we were working in a round, you would do the entire body of the pants, you would do the whole circle, but this time we're going to do just half the circle. So I'm going to work all the way around this way until I reach this stitch here where we have our chain. And so I'm just going to go ahead and complete this row of single crochets, and I'll see you once I reach that chain stitch. And now here I am reaching the end of the row right where that chain begins, and so now we're going to turn our work so we're working onto the chain now. And then just like before, I am placing 1 single crochet into every single one of these chain stitches up until I reach this point here halfway through the chain where I had first started the row. So all the way up until I reach that first single crochet, I'm just going to be placing a single crochet into every chain stitch. And so now right here where I first started the row, I'm going to insert my hook right into that single crochet and slip stitch, and then chain 1 and turn my work. So this is really no different than what we've been doing already with the pants, only now it's just in a smaller scale because we cut the entire thing in half so we can then work on one leg individually. So again, I'm now just going to place a single crochet into every single stitch, starting from this little chain portion here. I'm just going to single crochet all the way around this entire opening, and then back here up until I reach that very first single crochet. So we're doing the exact same thing we did with the main part of the pants, only now in a smaller circle scale. So now here I'm at the end of the row, so I'm inserting my hook right into that very first stitch, slip stitching, chaining 1, and then turning my work to continue into our next row. So that is the first 2 rows of the leg portion completed, and I do recommend that you keep a tally of how many rows you are doing. That way you can do the exact same number of rows on the other side for the other pant leg. So I'm just going to roughly tally the number of rows I'm doing as I go along. You do not need to do any increases or decreases as you work your way down this pants leg because we are going to do a pair of straight leg pants. Okay, so here's where I am at currently, and I did 70 rows here on this pants leg, which brings the bottom of the pants to about 8 or 9 inches above the top of my foot where I'm going to be ending the pants leg. And so the design that we are adding to the bottom here is a little bit more than 6 inches long, so you want to account for that design, and then anything beyond that, like 6.5 inches, is just going to be plain white all over again. So I'm going to have the design happening here, and then I'm going to have about 2.5 inches of plain white single crochet on the bottom, which is exactly where I want the design to land on this pair of pants. So I'm going to stop here now that I have done 70 rows, and we're going to go ahead and add the design to the bottom of the pants. Okay, so first things first, I already went ahead and just flipped the entire project inside out. That way all of the nasty parts like the seams or wherever we went ahead and started new skeins of yarn is all on the inside. So then when we're doing the design, we can focus on having the design on the outside. So I went ahead and flipped it so the right side of the pants, the side I like the best, is facing outward. And now I'm going to go ahead and get started on our design. And so now we're going to be doing this design in the same way that we did the tapestry sweater. So I'm just going to start with 3 single crochets here in the beginning of the row. And in that third single crochet, I'm going to pause when I only have 2 loops here on my hook, and I'm then going to bring my accent color in. I am using this dark navy blue, which is the exact same color that I used for the accent on the sweater. I'm going to go ahead and just bring this yarn in. I'm going to pick it up with my hook and then pull it through those 2 loops, therefore working in the blue yarn. And now we're going to go ahead and just do 1 stitch of blue, and then switch right back over to white using the tapestry crochet technique. I'm switching over to white, and then I'm going to go ahead and do 3 stitches of white, 2, and then onto this 3rd stitch here. I'm going to pause when I'm halfway through the stitch, and then switch right back to blue, to then do 1 stitch of blue, and switch back to white, and then do 3 stitches of white. So just like we did with the sweater, all the way around this entire row, I'm just going to go ahead and do 3 white, 1 blue, 3 white, 1 blue. So I'm going to go ahead and complete this row here, and I'll see you once I'm done with that. Okay, so I've now worked my way all the way around here for this entire row. I'm going to go ahead and finish off by just slip stitching right into this very first single crochet, like so, slip stitch, chain 1, and turn my work. And now we're going to do the exact same stitch pattern we just did, but opposite. So instead of every 3 white doing 1 blue, we're going to do every 3 blue completing 1 white. And you want to make sure the blue from the previous row is right in the center of these 3 blue. So you'd have 1 blue at the bottom and then 3 blue on top, with that 1 blue in the middle of the 3. And remember, when you are switching colors, you always want to bring the yarn to the wrong side. So instead of bringing the yarn backwards, I'm bringing it forwards, because we're now working with the wrong side on the inside. So if you remember that from when we were making this sweater, just make sure you're bringing this yarn onto the wrong side. So I'm going to go ahead and do 1 white single crochet, and before I can complete that stitch, I'm going to switch over to blue, like so. And I'm then going to do 3 blue single crochets. And now you can see what I'm talking about, where you want this to line up where the blue of the previous row is right in the middle of the 3 blue of this row. So I've got 3 blue single crochets, and then I'm switching over to white to do 1 white single crochet. And so now here you can see we've got 3 blue stitches, and then the 1 blue stitch from the previous row is right in the middle of those 3. And that's exactly how you want this to line up. So I'm going to do 1 stitch of white, and then switch over to blue, and then do 3 stitches of blue, lining up perfectly with that stitch of blue from the previous row. So I'm going to go ahead and continue the same pattern all the way around this entire row, just switching colors every 3 blue to 1 white, and then 3 blue, 1 white, all the way around until I reach the end of the row. So now I'm doing my very last stitch here in blue, and now at the end of the row, I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch into that first single crochet there, like so, and then I'm going to chain 1 and then turn my work. And now for the 3rd row, just like the design on the sweater, we're going to sort of turn these into diamond shapes. So we're going to do 1 blue right in the center of those 3 blues, so it's like a little plus sign. So I've got 1 blue, and then I'm switching over to the white, so I'm bringing that white yarn up through those 2 loops, and now I'm going to go ahead and do 3 white stitches. So just like the row we did before the last row, we're doing 3 white, 1 blue, and then I'm going to go ahead and switch over to that blue, so I can then place 1 blue stitch right in the center of these 3 blue stitches from the previous row. So then 1 blue stitch, and then switch right over to white, and then do 3 white stitches. So just like that very first row of the design that we did, I'm doing 3 white, 1 blue, 3 white, 1 blue, all the way around for this entire row. So I'm going to go ahead and complete this row, and I'll see you once I'm done with that. At the end of this row, I'm just going to go ahead and slip stitch into that very first stitch that we made, and then chain 1 and turn my work. So for this next row, we're just going to be doing all white single crochets all the way around. We're not switching colors at all in this row, but just like what we did during the sweater for the tapestry crochet, I am going to carry this blue yarn with me all the way throughout the row. And by that I mean when I'm inserting my hook into a stitch, I'm making sure the blue yarn is on top of my hook here, not underneath the hook. So then when I do my single crochet, that blue yarn is sandwiched in between the stitch, and therefore it gets carried along through the stitch. So just like we did when we were doing this design for the sweater, I'm just going to go ahead and carry that blue yarn along with me while I place 1 single crochet into every single stitch all the way around here with just some white yarn. Okay, and now at the end of this row, I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch right into that first single crochet and then chain one and turn my work. And now for this next row, we are going to be switching colors with every single stitch. So I'm going to start with this first stitch here in white, and then before I complete that stitch, I'm going to bring the blue yarn through, therefore switching to blue. And then the next stitch is going to be in blue, but before I can finish that stitch, I'm going to go ahead and bring the white yarn through and then do a stitch in white, and then again switch to blue, and then so on and so forth. So all the way around this entire row, you're just going to switch colors with every single stitch. So I'm going from white to blue, from blue to white, from white to blue, and then continuing my way all the way around the row. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this row here, just switching colors with every single stitch, and I'll see you once I'm done with that. Now at the end of this row, I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch right into that very first single crochet, chain one, and then turn my work. And now for this next row, we're just going to do an entire row of just this dark blue or whatever your accent color is. So I'm just doing a full row of single crochets in just the dark blue color, and just like we did before, I'm going to go ahead and carry that white yarn with me. So every time I'm doing one of these stitches, I'm making sure that white loose yarn here is on top of my hook, as you can see. So then whenever I do a single crochet stitch, that yarn is sandwiched in between the single crochet. Therefore, I'm carrying it along with me. So I'm going to go ahead and just do one row of plain blue single crochet all the way around, carrying that white yarn with me to the other side, and I'll see you once I'm done with this row here. So now at the end of this row, I'm just going to slip stitch right into that very first single crochet, chain one, and then turn my work. And now just like we did with that prior row, we are going to be switching colors with every single stitch like we did down here, only this time we're going to be alternating. So right here I have a white and then a blue and a white and a blue. So I'm going to start on the blue and then switch to white, blue, white, blue. So therefore we're making sort of a zigzag pattern instead of just up and down. So I'm going to go opposite of what this row already was. So right here I have a white stitch down below that blue row that we just finished. I have a white stitch, so I'm going to go ahead and complete that first stitch in blue, and then I'm going to switch over to white like so, and then looking below here you can see this stitch is blue, which is perfect, so then the stitch up here can be white. So we're just going to go back and forth from blue to white, from white to blue, all the way around in the opposite way that we did in that first row there, therefore making sort of a zigzag pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and work my way all the way around this row, just switching colors with every single stitch, and I will see you once I reach the end of this row. And then just like always, right into this last stitch here, I'm going to slip stitch, and then chain one and turn my work at the end of the row. And this next row is going to be super simple. We're just doing an entire row of single crochets in the white color or whatever your base color is. And like always, I'm carrying that blue yarn with me, so I'm making sure the yarn is on top of my hook every time I do a stitch. Therefore, when I do that single crochet stitch, the yarn is sandwiched in between the single crochet. So I'm just going to go ahead and work my way around this entire row, just doing one row of plain white single crochet, and I'll see you once I'm done with this row. I'm now doing the last stitch for this row, and I'm going to slip stitch right into that very first single crochet, chain one, and turn my work. And now for the next several rows here, we're going to be making the design for the flowers. So I will put the graph up here on the screen so you can follow along and just go ahead and make that flower design using the tapestry crochet method. And you are just going to go ahead and make several flowers all the way around the bottom of the pants leg. And if you wanted a step-by-step guide to each row of the flower, I have one when we made the sweater earlier in this video. So you can go back to that portion and follow along here on the pants leg, just as I demonstrated on the sweater itself. So I'm going to go ahead and make the flower design all the way along the bottom here of the pants leg, following the graph that I have up on the screen, and I will see you once I am done making the flowers. Okay, so as you can see here, I have now completed the flower design along the bottom of the pants, and then I also went ahead and replicated that same design we did earlier. So I just did the row of every other stitch and then one solid blue, and then every other stitch again to make that zigzag pattern. And then here I did those little plus sign or diamond shapes along the top here or the bottom of the pants leg, just replicating exactly what we did in the start of the design here. So this is our design now completed, and I still have about 2 inches left that I have to do of just plain single crochet with the white, as we did previously on the pants leg here. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut the blue yarn so that way we aren't working with that anymore. And I already finished off the row here. I slip stitched, chain one, and turned my work. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave a bit of a tail here with the blue yarn. And then right here, I'm going to go ahead and just cut that yarn, therefore detaching the blue yarn from our project. And now before I continue, I'm going to go ahead and turn these pants back inside out, so that way I'm working on the wrong side. We have finished the design here, so we can turn it back to the side we were originally working on. That way whenever I attach new yarn, or if I mess up a little bit, it's all on the inside where all the messy parts of the crochet is. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this back inside out. So now I have this inside out with the wrong side facing out. So now we can go ahead and continue just doing our single crochets all the way around. And I'm just working with the white yarn now, just as we've been doing previously on this entire pant leg. I'm just going to do continuous rows here of just single crochet until the pant leg is the length I want it to be. And I do recommend again that you keep a tally of how many rows you are doing. That way you can do the exact same number of rows on the other side. Okay, so I've now completed this entire pant leg here. I did the extra 2 or 3 inches down at the bottom to get the length I wanted with this pant leg. So this one is completed, and now we can go ahead and get started on the second leg of the pants. So if you can recall back to when we did this first pant leg here, I had you sort of pay attention to which direction we were going in to make sure there was no line or seam in the project. And for myself, it was with this seam here face up, and then the bottom of the pants facing me, the top of the pants facing away. I was then going to the left. So if on this pant leg, I would have started a new row and then gone to the left, which I did. And then if I were to go all the way around, by the time I get to this side here, I would be going this way, if that makes sense. I hope it does. Basically, to keep from having a weird seam when you attach this leg as well, just sort of visualize what one row would look like. So if I was going to the left, it would be around. And then right here where we still have to crochet, I would be starting here and then going this way, like so. So that's exactly what I'm going to do with this pants leg. So just like we did with the other pants leg, I'm going to be starting right in the middle of this chain section here, right where the crotch is. And so I have the opening for the pants leg here, and then that chain section in the middle. And so I'm going to just insert my hook right into the same place where I started the row on the other side, and I'm just working into the other half of the chain. So all of these stitches we worked into on this side, I'm just going to work into those exact same stitches now on this side. And so I'm going to bring my yarn through like so. I'm going to bring it through, chain one to lock it in place. And now just like we did with the first pants leg, I'm just going to do these few single crochets until I reach the body of the project here, like so. And now that I've worked my way all the way down halfway of this chain portion here, I'm going to place a single crochet right into the main part of the pants. And then just like we've done before, I'm just going to single crochet into every single stitch all the way around until I reach right back to where this little chain portion is. So just doing one row all the way around this opening. And now right here, I've reached that little chain section again that goes right in between the pants. And I'm going to go ahead and just single crochet into every single one of these stitches back until I reach that stitch that we started on. So it is really no different than what we did with that first leg of the pants. And then again, I'm reaching that first single crochet I made, and I'm going to slip stitch right into the start of that row, chain one, and then turn my work. And then you're just going to repeat that exact same process and keep track of how many rows you're doing. You're going to do the exact same number of rows on this pants leg as we did on the other one. So I will be doing 70 rows, and then I will complete the design, and then I will do another 18 rows after the design to get that bottom portion of the white as well. So I have now finished crocheting both legs of the pants, as you can see here. I also went ahead and woven all of the loose ends, except I did leave one little tail here at the very back where we have the opening and the waistband. And then I flipped the pants right side out, so they're pretty much completed now. All the crochet is done. Like I said, I wove all the loose ends in. All of the crochet all the way down to the bottom is completed, so this is a perfect pair of pants. But now we are going to go ahead and add the elastic to the waistband. As I explained in the beginning of the tutorial, we've got that opening right in the middle of the waistband here that we can thread that elastic through. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece of elastic that I can fit right into the waistband to just cinch in that waist and help hold up the pants a little bit more securely. So now I've got my elastic here for the waistband, and you can find this at pretty much any craft store, even like a Walmart or something. It's pretty easy to come by, but I've just got like this nice piece of elastic. I'm going to go ahead and just wrap it around my waist. So I'm just going to wrap it around my waist like so, and without stretching it too much, I'm just going to bring this piece right here to the front And then I'm going to go ahead and cut this elastic, leaving about like 1/2 inch of overlap here. That way we can overlap the elastic and have some fabric to be able to sew it together. So I'm just leaving a little bit of an overlap. I'm going to go ahead and cut the elastic right here. So now I'm going to go ahead and find that opening that we left here in the waistband of this pair of pants. I'm going to take the elastic here and just poke a safety pin right through it. This just makes it easier to find the end as we're threading it through the pants, just like so. And now going to the waistband where we have that opening, I'm just going to start with the safety pin side here, and I'm going to thread it right in, and then you're just going to kind of feed it through. So you're going to feel for that metal safety pin and just kind of pinch and move it along all the way through the waistband here. Now I have reached the other end of the waistband here, so I'm going to go ahead and just pull that elastic through like so. And then I'm going to remove the safety pin because we don't need that anymore. That's just to thread the elastic through. And now we're here with the elastic on either side, and I'm going to go ahead and recreate that overlap amount that we had when we cut the elastic. So I had it overlapping about this much when I cut the elastic. So this is all I need now to go ahead and sew this together. So I'm going to take a needle, which I have right here. I'm going to take like a normal sharp sewing needle and then just a little bit of thread. I just have this light blue thread. It doesn't really matter what color because it's going to get hidden. I'm going to use that thread and that needle and very, very securely sew both sides of the elastic together here. I have now stitched both sides of the elastic together. It really doesn't have to be perfect. No one's going to see it. I just did a little simple stitch all the way around the border and then a couple stitches right here in the middle to keep it securely together. So now we're going to go ahead and make sure that all of this is inside of the waistband. So I'm going to kind of push this into the waistband here, like so. So now we have both sides of the waistband sitting flush against each other, and now I'm going to go ahead and take a yarn needle, so a darning needle, and I'm going to find that loose end that I left from the waistband. I'm going to thread this needle, and then starting from where this loose end is, which is all the way back and this side of the waistband, I'm just going to stitch these two sides of the waistband all the way up and around to the other side, therefore making this just one perfect circle with elastic right in between. So I'm just going to go ahead and just stitch all the way up, making sure the stitches are lined up on both sides, and I'm just sewing these two sides of the waistband together, like so, all the way around to the other side. Whew, okay, this was a long video, and I'm so grateful that you stuck with me through all of it. If you did make your own matching sets, then please send me a picture over on Instagram or just tag me in any pictures that you post of it, because I would love to see what color palette you picked and how it turned out. If you have any questions throughout this entire process, then feel free to put those into the comments down below, and I'll do my very best to get back to those. Or if you just have something you want to say, you could also go ahead and comment that, and I'll do my best to respond to you as well. Thank you so much for sticking with me and for supporting me throughout this entire video. If you want to continue to help me create more designs and patterns, then please do so by subscribing, liking this video, and as I mentioned, commenting down below. I appreciate all of you so much, and I really hope that you liked this design. I will be posting a vlog soon of the entire process starting in like October all the way until February of me making both the sweater and the pants. So keep a lookout for that. I hope to see you back here soon in the next week or so as I post more tutorials. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful day or a wonderful week until I see you again. And I believe Valentine's Day is in like 2 days since I am posting this, so I hope you have a wonderful Valentine's Day as well. I will see you again very soon. Goodbye.